This guy right here, he is not right in the head. Recruiting desperate people, running a secret death game for amusement, and laughing through it all, it's pretty fair to say he is straight up insane. It does make me wonder, what if the law caught up with him at last? This man's criminal history makes Thanos appear like a jaywalker, ranging from mass kidnapping to basically mass murders, to maybe even staging his own death. I have read entire law books, watched both seasons of Squid Game 3 times, and even in slow motion. All of this just to get the answer to this question. So in this video, we are going to give the frontman his very own trial in court, and we are going deep. Oh, and for fun, let's add a kill count because I totally haven't counted every single body in every game. I mean, if we are going to do this, let's do it right. Let's go right back to the beginning. 455 people are being recruited under really questionable circumstances. It's not precisely what you would call a solid business plan. In a free rides vehicle, his victims get straight up gassed into unconsciousness.
무궁화꽃이 게임하는 데까지는 여기서
Imagine getting in and believing you're going home, only to wake up in a new room with hundreds of strangers around you, all wearing similar pajamas. Not only is that unsettling, it is outright abduction on a grand scale. I mean, you can literally multiply it by 455. Now, here's the real kicker. This wasn't just one kidnapping multiplied by 455. A whole system was in place. Officers in charge of recruitment? Check. Monitoring? Check. The organization was run like a Fortune 500 company, but the product was human lives. And let's not forget about the competitors themselves. They deliberately targeted those who had little to lose or were in debt. Taking advantage of the weak for one's own benefit? That's unethical at best and criminally predatory at worst. This human trafficking, with all the back-end research from full-on stalking to drugging them in a van, would get you around 25 years in prison per contestant. And as they did this to 455 players, Mr. Front starts off with a whopping 11,375 years in prison. And if you thought that was crazy, well, I hate to say this, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. We now move on to red light, green light, the first time around.
야, 저.
무궁화꽃이 피었습니다입니다. 전진할 수 있으며.
On paper, it's a classic from childhood. You move when the giant nightmare doll isn't looking. And if it turns around and you move, you're out. The sad part is, however, this robo-chick is a hyper-AI targeting drone dressed up as an underage girl who signals information to a giant team of snipers. So, the penalty for disobeying the rules? Instant death. Just whack, no cautions, no second chances.
무궁화꽃?
320.
개쇼하지 말고 일어나.
All of a sudden, it wasn't as much of a game anymore, and you can probably guess what happened. A massive panic. After a fun day at school, 255 of the 456 competitors failed to make it past the finish line. So in what is probably only 1 hour of playtime, 255 murders would be added to the list. And talking about murders, let's get that kill count involved. But as these Squid Games take place in Korea, we do have to dive into the law book. In South Korea, death row does exist, but for some reason they just never execute the people who actually are on death row. So we might want to use a life sentence for every single death. And while we are on the topic of talking about being in South Korea, this brings us to our next crime on this way too long list. All guards are equipped with heavy weaponry. And in the red light, green light game, snipers were having a field day with all the moving targets to practice on. However, we are not in the Wild West with a Weapons and Ammunition Act. Having a firearm in Korea gets you 10 years behind bars, and in most cases a fine of up to 10 million won, which would be around $7,000. This made me wonder, how many weapons have been illegally imported? Well, to answer that, we are gonna have to do some counting. My estimate would be there is at least 1 gun per guard present. So how many guards are there? Luckily, some folks on Reddit counted this, saves me some time, so shout out to you. For the squares, there is a total of 36 in the control room and 6 in surveillance, which brings us to 42. For the Doritos, there are 38 guards. And finally, the Circle Gang consists of 382 members, which brings it to a total of 462 guards. And you know what that means. That would be another 4,620 years and 4.6 billion Korean won added to the sentence. With that much debt, the frontman might as well join a Squid Game too. But he would never do something that crazy, right? Right? Anyway, murdering people is for lousy amateurs. Why would you stop there? Because we now move on to the next crime. You may be thinking, all right, so they've killed 255 people. They will undoubtedly stop and reflect for a while. Not at all. Rather, they got to work disposing of the bodies right away. Like they were cleaning up after a large BBQ, they had industrial-sized incinerators equipped and ready to go. And the rest of the competitors who made it through, they were forced to watch in order to show how pointless their lives were. Tampering with evidence? Check. Mishandling of human remains? Double check. It's a logistical nightmare and a moral injustice. That will be another year per coffin. And spoiler alert, as out of the 456, only one player survives and one decided to retire. Let's just add 454 years right away. The game continues, and thus more childhood memories will be turned into a nightmare. Each one was created with the goal of killing as many people as possible in ever more inventive methods. About a dozen people died as a result of not being able to cut out a cookie shape. And once the 10-minute time limit was up, I'll just take a look. These cookies ended up taking 93 more lives from the contestants. So that's another 93 lives added to the sentence and the kill count. One of these contestants decided he was not going out with a bang, so he took one of the guards hostage. The guard had to do a face reveal, and all of a sudden the front man himself came out of his chair and shot the guard like it was nothing. But that's not just another murder. As this evidence shows, the following words spoken.
우리가 누군지 알게 되면 죽는다.
This basically means everyone is forced to wear sweaty masks. And if they don't, they die. That's a criminal threat towards every single guard hired and adds 1386 years. Then we had the tug-of-war game, which cut the contestant group in half. Then he facilitated a murder party at night. You can make the argument he didn't do the killing himself, but he would have killed them anyway eventually. There was a certain indictment with a doctor who tried to make some money by selling organs. The front man didn't like that though. Let's not forget about the betrayal of Century at the marble game. Rest in peace, Ali. Which brings us to the glass bridge game.
참가자 여러분을 환영합니다. 한 쌍의 유리는 두 가지 유리에도 버틸 수 있을 만큼 튼튼한 앞에 놓인 한 쌍의 유리 중에 그것들을 받고.
The outcome? There were more broken glass pieces than in a Greek wedding, and far more lives lost. And then Sang-woo went demon mode and killed player 67, and eventually unalived himself. All of these shenanigans would add 107 life sentences to the frontman's name. Let's now discuss the frontman. The fact that he murdered his own brother, Officer Hwang Jun-ho, is the one thing that truly bothers me. An undercover police officer named Jun-ho worked to reveal the game. In order to collect evidence and bring these villains to justice, he put his life in danger. How did his brother express gratitude to him? By throwing him down a cliff after shooting him.
나랑 가자.
형이 왜?
That is first-degree attempted family drama murder. He still gets a life sentence, and maybe he was being merciful by not fully murdering his own brother. Let's fast forward to season 2. As if operating a murder game wasn't enough, these criminals decided to take their illegal operations outside. For example, the crazy vehicle chases. When Seong Gi-hun was on a hunt to put an end to these heinous games, he ended up in the front man's car. These weren't just Hollywood-style, high-speed pursuits. No, they were well-planned, potentially fatal stunts, with henchmen prepared to smash into automobiles or flip them over in order to keep their sinister secret safe. A long record of traffic violations would be added to the police's criminal file if they became engaged.
작전 시작하겠습니다.
뭡니까? 타이어가 터졌습니다.
여자 공격당했습니다.
Not to mention the stalking. Do you recall how they recruited needy people by sending those creepy invitations? Simply put, that is pressure and targeted harassment. People were being followed, intimidated, and prevented from living in peace. Aggravated harassment and intimidation is what that is. They are essentially collecting charges like they are trying to catch them all. For this entire fiasco, he gets another 17 years in Grand Royal Jail Hotel. The new Squid Game starts off again with red light, green light. This time, you would think it would go better as Gi-hun is literally snitching the frontman. However, the effect is ruined quickly by a bee, and this Thanos guy is helping a lot too. He is a vibe though. The first game ended up claiming 91 lives, so count it up. Although the frontman still made sure a lot of deaths occurred, he wasn't gonna risk it and switched sides and decided he would become this year's player 1. And now being a part of the game, next up was the pentathlon, a series of mini-games as a one-legged team. The pentathlon ended up claiming 7 of the teams. That's another 35 lives added to the sentence. Next is probably the craziest game of the season, Mingle. It's basically an advanced version of musical chairs where you have to enter a room with the named amount, and otherwise, you're a goner. The frontman decided he was not gonna lose at his own game, and even made sure when 3 entered the room, only 2 would come out. This mingling party cost the contestants another 134 lives. After that, while the girls were crying in the bathroom, the boys decided they needed an uneven number of players, and had another party, where sadly, the most hated beloved Thanos also lost his life. May he he writhes like a butterfly. That adds 5 more to the counter. But let's take a quick break from the contestants. As the detectives finally made it to the island, they were not given a warm welcome. The frontman's goons had set up a booby trap, which ended up costing another life. Setting up traps, however, is not legal and can give you another 6 months in jail. And owning the explosives for it in South Korea is another 10 years and 10 million won. And it even turned out the fisherman was an inside man and killed another one of the detective squad. And that brings us to the final crime on the list. In the final moments, the show of course ends in absolute madness. As the flashing lights are turned on, the final nightmare unfolds. The teams start killing each other again, but this time, instead of hiding in a corner, Gi-hun managed to eliminate the guards afterwards and overpowered them. Even the frontman himself is joining in and is literally shooting people in his own organization. The chaos unfolds and ends up costing 42 more lives across both sides of the games. And at last, the genius himself is revealed. Just like the previous player, 001, he ends his life with a gunshot sound effect. But who knows? Did the guards know it was him? Did he just shoot in the talkie-walkie? Did someone else shoot him? The least he could do after causing all of this chaos was to take responsibility for it. The charges for this crime would be fraud and obstruction of justice. Also, because it's not exactly morally acceptable to fake your death, let's add identity deception. Although as evidence is missing, this will be left to interpretation. And with that all finally rounded up, the frontman's final sentence is 765 life sentences, 17,862 years in prison, and a fine of a whopping 4.61 billion won. This guy is a goner for sure, and probably in more than 100 lifetimes, and maybe a new Guinness World Record for most evil villain ever. What do you think? Did I miss any crimes? We'll see you next time, and remember guys, don't go into random white vans, unless you want to be in Squid Game Season 3. If you want to see this guy go to jail, click the video on the screen.